Back. Yet another fight for fairness in this country may be a brewing. Nowhere in America is the wealth disparity and the control of special interests more obvious to anyone who looks than in our country's tax code system. Consider your average tax rate. Think for a minute. Close your eyes, put a number in your head. Of every dollar you make, what percentage of your total income was paid in taxes last year? You got a number? Okay. Now consider the latest data from the IRS, which shows the 400 highest earning taxpayers in America, people who made at least $138 million each in 2007, paid an average tax rate total of 16.6%. My bet is your number is bigger. That number lower than any year since the IRS started making these reports. In fact, look at the decrease in the wealthiest's average tax rate since 1992. Yes, having money helps to influence the tax code so that you don't have to pay taxes. Nice downward slide there. It's not just the wealthy individuals getting a good break on tax rates, however. Corporations increasingly leaning on special interests, think of it, oil, go down the list, to lobby for tax code exemptions specifically in their favor. You see all this, you really start to wonder who is lobbying for the fairness of this democracy. Well, in these bitterly partisan times, a light of hope emerging. Two lawmakers reaching across the aisle to bring fairness to our tax system. And joining us now, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon and Republican Senator Gregg of New Hampshire. They together are introducing a new bipartisan plan for, quote, tax fairness and simplification to try to reconcile so many of the disparities that I was just describing. Senator Gregg, I'll begin with you.
Thank you.
The big concern is that tax code is the home of special interest exemptions, loopholes, 10 different ways. How do both of you fight the perception that it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, both Republicans and Democrats are working to create some accommodation for a special interest in the tax code? In other words, so many people feel like it's them versus the politicians, and you two come forward and say, no, we'll actually create a fair plan. How do you back that up?
Well, we eliminate a large number, well over 64 different deductions and exemptions which presently exist in the code. Take the revenues from those deductions, which no longer will be allowed, and use them to reduce the rates from everybody certainly under $200,000 of income, and for businesses generally, so that they're more willing to go out and invest, and so that there's a better investment climate to compete with in the worldwide market, so that we can create jobs here rather than in Europe.
Sure. I guess the issue, though, Senator Wyden, is the perception that the tax code is where the game rigging happens. It's where people that don't deserve to make money. It's where people who feel like they should deserve to make money feel like they get overly taxed. You know from your constituents, I'm sure, far more than I. How do you fight the perception that special interests control the tax code?
Dylan, this is an anti-rigging the tax code. This is an effort, for example, to make sure that those people that you were talking about can't just go out and hire a tax lawyer to figure out how to navigate 10,000 sections of the tax code, figure out how to pay as little income as possible. Maybe their tax lawyer tells them to go out and hide some of it. What we do is target the relief at hardworking middle-class families. Let's say you have somebody who's got a median income of $50,000. We triple the standard deduction for that person.
Why is that so important? Why is that so important?
That means they get a $30,000 standard deduction. That means that their $50,000 income, essentially on more than half of it, they're home free. They are not going to get clobbered. We keep the popular deductions for their mortgage and the matters that are so important to the middle class. And what Senator Gregg and I go out and do is close up those tax loopholes, and we're going to make sure that those people you're talking about are going to be hard put to try to get them back in.
Yeah, I think, Dylan, the biggest loser under this proposal, quite honestly, are the people who earn their living by counseling people on how to avoid taxes.
Yeah,
because basically we eliminate all sorts of loopholes, deductions, and exemptions, and go to more of a flat rate for everybody.
two questions for you, Senator Gregg. Very quickly, I could ask either of you this, but I'll ask you, Senator Gregg. Have you guys talked to the White House about this?
I know Ron has. I haven't, but I think Ron has carried that part of the water.
Senator Wyden,
Dylan, I have, and in fact, the White House is working on tax reform. Austin Goolsbee, one of the White House point people, had me on the phone for well over an hour recently working on this issue. And in fact, when I introduced an earlier version of this idea, Senator Gregg and I have made a number of changes since then. Rahm Emanuel was the principal sponsor in the House. So there is a lot of history in the White House, and I think another reason why Senator Gregg and I are in a position to duplicate what happened in 1986 when Ronald Reagan, a Republican president, and Bill Bradley, another tall Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, got together and made the tax system simpler and fairer.
Yeah. Senator Gregg, let's talk about the corporate tax rate for a second, because you've got a few things that come together. One, the actual corporate tax rate in this country is higher than a lot of other countries, many Western countries. However, there's a lot of gaming that goes on, exemptions, offshoring, hiding revenue, all these things, and as a result, if you look at the 30 richest OECD countries, basically the most developed economic countries in the world, the average corporation pays 3.4%. Now, the American corporate taxes as a percent of GDP is 2% as compared to 3%. So that kind of validates the loopholing. You are reducing the corporate tax rate to 24%, but are you also eliminating the capacity for me to exempt myself from that 24%?
Absolutely. That's the whole purpose here, is to reduce the number of available exemptions and deductions and then reduce the rate. So that capital is invested in a more efficient way, so that people, instead of going out and investing for the purposes of avoiding taxes, actually go out and invest for the purposes of creating jobs here in the United States. Right now we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. When we complete this bill, should it pass, we will be right in the middle, but we will be way ahead of our European partners and many of our Asian competitors. So it'll actually create more incentive for companies to expand here in the United States, and for foreign companies to come here and locate their manufacturing or their business activity here in the United States, because they'll have a tax rate which is competitive and actually gives them an advantage over some of their competitors in other countries.
Very quickly, Senator Wyden, philosophically, how do you two look at the approach to the taxation of wealth versus work?
What we do is we narrow that gap. You've heard Warren Buffett say often in the past he thinks it's ridiculous that he, in effect, gets a lot lower tax rate than his secretary. We narrow that gap, but we give the opportunity, Dylan, for everybody to get ahead. That's what we want to do in our country, is we want to have incentives for everybody to get ahead. We stop some of the rigging of the tax system today. It's broken. What we want is a simpler, fairer code, and we certainly narrow the gap that you're talking about.
Well, I applaud both of you for your efforts. I had the opportunity to read through, again, some of the drafting coming in, and I look forward to continuing to cover your efforts to do this. And Senator Gregg, will you come back another time and talk credit default swaps with me one time? That's not for today.
We've done that on occasion. I'd be happy to rejoin that discussion.
That's for another day. Enjoy your afternoon, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now to my